The Mets have been trying to keep the secret as well as they can, but slowly the word is starting to get out.
In 1985, the New York Mets spring training facility was the frenzy of the sports world. Why? Because they had the greatest prospect baseball had ever seen. He was an unorthodox pitcher who seemingly came out of nowhere and was topping speeds that were previously thought humanly impossible.
It's like trying to catch something you can't hardly see.
The Mets coaches, players, and staff were in awe.
I never dreamed a baseball could be thrown that fast. The wrist must have a lot to do with it, and all that leverage. You can hardly see the blur of it as it goes by. As for hitting the thing, frankly, I just don't think it's humanly possible.
What this pitcher was doing at the Mets training camp in 1985 was something that had never been seen in the sport.
Unknown pitcher who may be the best to ever play the game.
But the thing that made his skill even more surprising, this man had never played organized baseball before in his life. But unfortunately, Sidd Finch would never get to play in a regular season major league game.
So this was back in '85, and even today, the fastest recorded pitch is Chapman at 106.
In a game?
In a game. But what makes this story so extraordinary is that Sidd Finch was repeatedly topping 120 miles an hour.
What?
And apparently he was like super accurate too. You know, you'd think if you were throwing that fast, you'd be pretty wild. Sports Illustrated was the ones who initially broke this story. So it was in the April issue of 1985.
Sports Illustrated's article breaking the story was titled, "The Curious Case of Sidd Finch." On the left side of the spread, there was an odd, unassuming subtitle.
So it was later revealed that this subtitle was like a coded message in a way.
Sidd's story was just as unorthodox as his pitching. He was a devout Buddhist, a professional-level French horn player. He spent his early life in an orphanage in England. He was adopted by a well-off family, excelled in school, and at age 18 was accepted into Harvard. He would only stay for one semester.
His old roommate from Harvard, Henry Peterson, said, "I'd wake up morning after morning and look across at his bed, which had a woven native carpet of some sort on it. I have an idea he told me it was made of yak fur, and never had the sense it had been slept in. He had almost no belongings. A knapsack, a bowl he kept in the corner on the floor, a couple of wool shirts, always very clean, and maybe a pair or so of blue jeans. One pair of hiking boots. I always had the feeling that he was very bright." And then one day he just left, and this Henry Peterson didn't know why. "I came back one afternoon, and everything was gone. The little rug, the horn. Actually, there was so little stuff to begin with that it was hard to tell he wasn't there anymore. I heard from him once, from Egypt. He sent pictures. He was on his way to Tibet to study."
Sidd got on the Mets' radar several years later, in 1984. He ran into Bob Schaefer, the manager of a Mets AAA team in Maine.
Well, what happens next is that we sit and talk, this kid and I, out there on the grass of the park. He sits with the big boots tucked under his legs, like one of those yoga guys. And he tells me he's not sure if he wants to play big league baseball, but he'd like to give it a try. He's never played before, but he knows the rules, even the infield fly rule, he tells me with a smile. And he knows he can throw a ball with complete accuracy and enormous velocity. He won't tell me how he's done this, except that he, quote, learned it in the mountains in a place called Po in Tibet. That's where he said he had learned to pitch, up in the mountains, flinging rocks and meditating.
As bizarre as the encounter was, Bob Schaefer knew he couldn't let this guy slip away. He had seen his arm talent firsthand. He wrote up an unprecedented scouting report and sent it off to New York.
Of course, the Mets front office can't really get their heads around a report like this, because, it'd have to be the first prospect that had never come up through traditional. The Mets manager at the time was Dave Johnson. He calls this Bob Schaefer just to kind of see what was actually going on. And Schaefer told him more about it and kind of confirmed it was all legit and everything. So the Mets then.
So had Schaefer seen him pitch?
Just like what he showed him that day. You know, he didn't need to see a lot to know it was pretty outstanding.
Yeah.
They decide it's best. They send this guy an invitation to the Mets training camp. Well, they sent him the invitation in January
Of 85.
of 1985. So 1985 was a pretty different time than today. So since I wasn't around, I went back and found like some news headlines from the year so we can try to get a sense of what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
January 19, Springsteen released Born in the USA.
Oh, wow.
So music-wise, back then you had, well, Tom Petty, of course. You had Springsteen, Madonna. It was still way before Nirvana. But there was U2.
U2 and Blondie.
I know there was still music on MTV.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what was going on music-wise. January 21st, Reagan inaugurated for second term.
Well, he won 49 states.
That's just so hard to imagine.
I know, you can't even.
It's not even that long ago.
No, I know. It's not even 40 years and you can't even wrap your mind around something like that happening.
First domain name was registered. Guess what it was? First .com.
Internet.com.
No, way off. It was symbolics.com.
That was about on the tip of my tongue.
In April, New Coke was introduced. Hear about
Sugarless Coke?
No.
Or cocaineless Coke?
Well, this was like a new formula. So it wasn't a separate, they like changed Coke to this new Coke.
Oh.
So they only had one.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
Because apparently they had run like taste tests or something, convinced them. They tried to tweak it to like taste a little sweeter, more like Pepsi.
It didn't last though, did it, New Coke?
Well, so it lasted, but they brought back the original after only 2 months.
Oh, they got rid of the original.
Yeah, because it's just New Coke. So then they brought back the other one, called it Coca-Cola Classic, and then I think this other one lasted until like 2004 or something.
Oh, okay.
May, Jordan won Rookie of the Year. July, the first Back to the Future came out. Microsoft Windows 1.0 came out. So
Willie Gates and the boys.
advent of the PC, I guess. And by year's end, 48,685,438 people had died in total, just from all causes across the globe.
Huh.
It's pretty much the same as 84 and 86, but just last year, in 2023, over 60 million people died. So, kind of makes you wonder.
Makes you wonder.
Why so many more people are dying these days.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of think of the world as becoming safer.
But yet more people are
yet-
dying every year.
12 million more people died last year than
Jeez.
85, so found that kind of odd.
Show that to, what's that guy's name who's always talking about how things are getting better?
Steven Pinker?
Steven Pinker, yeah.
Yeah.
Suck it, Pinker.
Suck it, Pinker.
In January of 1985, Sidd Finch got an invitation to the Mets training camp. But at this point, he was still very far from becoming a big league pitcher.
He gets his invitation to the training camp, but it's kind of a weird situation. You'd think, like, who wouldn't want to be a pro athlete, you know?
If they could throw 120.
Well, yeah, but this guy, this whole time, he's kind of wishy-washy. So he says he'll show up to camp, but he has 4 stipulations if he is going to come. 1, there would be no contract commitments yet. 2, he would have to have complete privacy in the off hours of camp. 3, he would not participate in any drills or team activities. And 4, he would have to demonstrate his pitching in private to the Mets with no press or photographs. So he said the reason for all this was like he just hadn't decided yet if he wanted to actually play or not. And he probably didn't want to raise expectations of like the public. I mean, if they see this guy pitching out there and then he says, I don't know, go back to the mountains or something.
Yeah. Has there been a movie made about this guy?
There's a There's like a short 30 for 30, not a full one.
Sounds like a great movie, although in the movie you would have the scout would be in the mountains somewhere and just see this kid throwing a rock.
Yeah, whoa.
Whoa, you know?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird I guess it kind of shows how extraordinary they thought he was if they're going to agree to all this. It's like, who do you think you are? Like, no one's bigger than the team. Or they did agree. The groundskeeper built like an enclosure bullpen alongside the field with like black canvas so that he could show off his pitching to the Mets in private.
The catcher, Ron Reynolds, was one of the first people to experience Sidd throwing inside this enclosure.
Well, I hope nothing like that guy ever comes down the pike again. The first time I see him is inside this canvas coop out there on the pitcher's mound, a thin kid getting ready to throw, and I'm thinking he'll just want to toss a couple warm-up pitches. So I'm standing behind the plate without a mask, chest protector, pads, or anything, holding my glove up, sort of half-assed to give him a target to throw at. And suddenly I see this wind-up like a pretzel gun loony, and the next thing I've been blown 2 or 3 feet back, and I'm sitting on the ground with the ball in my glove. My catching hand feels like it's been hit with a sledgehammer.
I didn't think about that. The catcher has to catch the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems unsafe at some point, at some velocity.
120 mile an hour, yeah.
While Sidd Finch was blowing Ron Reynolds off his feet at the Mets training camp, just 10,000 miles south, and 71 years earlier, something equally unbelievable was happening. A story was unfolding that, in time, would come to blow every historian and intellectual in the world right off of their feet. May 20th, 1916, South Georgia Island. 3 men mysteriously appear in a tiny Norwegian whaling port on the east coast of this uninhabited...
That's next episode. Why are you trying to combine these into one video? Just stick to the Sidd Finch script. Thought that was pretty obvious.
Let's get back to the other unbelievable story. Where are we? Oh, right. Sidd Finch was blowing the catcher Ron Reynolds off his feet with unbelievably fast pitches.
Mel Stottlemyre was the Mets pitching coach, so he'd kind of been working with Finch when he would show up to this enclosure, and he said, "I don't understand the mechanics of it. Anyone who tries to throw the ball that way should fall flat on his back. But I've seen it. I've seen it 100 times. It's the most awesome thing that has ever happened in baseball."
At this stage, the Mets are playing a delicate waiting game. They've seen what Finch can do on the rubber. They'd surely win every game he pitched. But Sidd still wouldn't commit to playing.
At one point, apparently, they brought in an expert on Eastern religions, not to talk with Sidd, but they actually didn't want Sidd to know they brought him in, but just try to learn what they were dealing with a little bit with this guy. So this guy speculated he was basically an aspiring monk and a disciple of Lama, probably gonna butcher this, Lama Milara Spa. So that guy was like one of those yogis who you hear stories could harness the power of the mind. The story about him was he could produce internal heat, survive a long snowstorm with just a normal shirt on. Out in the cold, just because he could generate, internal heat. So they kind of think something like that might be what's going on with this Sidd Finch. Like he's tapped into something he's able to harness. So the Mets asked this guy if he thought there was any chance Sidd would commit to baseball if he's this aspiring monk. And he told him, "There's a chance. You will remember that the Buddha himself, after what is called the Great Reunification, finally realized that even in the most severe austerities, though he conquered lust and fear and acquired a great deal of self-knowledge, truth itself could not necessarily be found. So after fasting for 6 years, he decided to eat again." The biggest problem Finch has with baseball is that nirvana, which is the state all Buddhists wish to reach, means literally the blowing out. Specifically, the purifying of oneself of greed, hatred, and delusion. Baseball is symbolized to a remarkable degree by those very 3 aspects. Greed, huge money contracts, stealing second base, robbing a guy of a base hit, charging for a seat behind an iron pillar, etc. Hatred, players despising management, pitchers hating hitters, the Cubs detesting the Mets, etc. and delusion. The slider, the pitch out, the hidden ball trick, and so forth. So you can see why it's not easy for Finch to give himself up to a way of life so opposite to what he has been led to cherish. That's ultimately what they think the problem is. It just seems at odds.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole culture, too, it's gotta not be too attractive. Conversations with Finch himself have apparently been exercises in futility. All conventional inducements, huge contracts, advertising tie-ins, the banquet circuit, ticker tape parades, having his picture on a Topps bubblegum card, mean little to him, as do the perks. He said, "You're very kind to offer me a Suzuki motorcycle, but I cannot drive." He has very politely declined whatever overtures the Mets have offered. The struggle is an absolutely internal one. He will resolve it. Last week, he announced that he would let the management know what he was going to do on or around April 1st.
Unfortunately, Sidd Finch would not live to make that decision.
What?
But not because he died. He never got to make that decision because he was never alive in the first place.
What?
Sidd Finch wasn't a real person. The whole thing was a hoax orchestrated by Sports Illustrated.
What?
Trying to fool everybody.
April Fool's Day?
Yeah, the issue came out on April 1st, 1985. So,
I'll be darned.
his whole story was created by the author, George Plimpton.
Yeah.
And it was pulled off, I didn't show you any pictures, but it was pulled off in person by Joe Burton. So Joe Burton was the guy that got to play him for the photographs. And he actually went to spring training and was like peeking his head out of the enclosure and stuff. So, it's like fans and people could see him.
So the Mets were in on it?
Mets were all in on it. So all those player quotes and stuff. And what I didn't mention, so in the article it said he threw 168 miles an hour. So I didn't mention that just because that's so unbelievable.
Yeah. That's hilarious. You had me going. The whole time I thought this was an actual guy.
We were just a bunch of people that dropped a water balloon out the window to watch it fall 20 stories and go splat, and have a good laugh and wave at the people down there and go back to work.
Sports Illustrated thought they could try having some fun. But at what cost? In 2024, for all intensive purposes, Sports Illustrated is dead. The moral of the story? Don't ever do something that people don't already expect from you, or else one day you might die.